All right, y'all. Here I am on the bench out in the garage because I'm working out here with some chemicals that, my wife works in the basement. It's also our laundry room, and she doesn't really like the smell of some of these things like PB Blast or penetrating oil and WD 40 and Hoppy's number 9 and all the good smells, right? So I respect her and I appreciate her efforts on the home front. So I'm out here, and I got my ass out here in my own garage with the 19. This is a 1983 Steinberger L2. It's an original um, Brooklyn, New York made, number 643. And I picked this up and I'm doing a restoration of it. This is the the ninth Steinberger L2 or XL2 that I've had. And so I'm doing my version of a restoration. I already dressed the frets. You can see that's been, I haven't polished them out yet, but I have worked out all of the ick and the wear. There was plenty of fret left, so that's good. And at this point, before I do a little final polishing of them, I'm going to treat the fretboard. And interestingly enough, how you treat the fretboard on these early Steinberger instruments that have phenolic resin is you use WD-40, much of the same way you treat rosewood with a citrus oil. Some people like lemon oil, some people like other oils. I use F1 oil actually, which is a mix, and that works really well on rosewood. But this isn't wood, this is phenolic resin. And interesting though, you look at it, and I've already cleaned it off a little bit, and you look at it and think, well, it sure looks like rosewood. I mean, look, isn't that grain I'm seeing in there? I see wood grain. What are you talking about? But yeah, like up there, it looks like wood grain, but it isn't wood grain. It's layers of typically they use something like craft paper, like brown craft paper, but it's resin impregnated paper in a lamination. That's what it is. So this is what you're seeing is layers of paper and phenolic resin that was compressed and became the fretboard. Interesting, huh? I think ebonol. There's been a few of these like composite types of things that were used over the years. But anyway, so what I do, just because the feeling of rubbing WD-40 onto something with my bare fingers and the smell, which I love, is okay by me. I just basically work in a very slight amount down the neck. And like I said, I just work it in. I'm not rubbing super hard or anything. Just making sure that it's coated all the way around everything. And the idea being with the WD-40 is when you see the layers, grain, I can't do air quotes, but the grain, the wood grain, it means that moisture has worked its way into the fretboard. So the WD-40 is moisture displacement, water displacement, WD formula, and that's the whole idea of it. So by doing this, sometimes once, sometimes I do it a couple times. You don't have to lay it on and leave it overnight or anything like that. I work it in a little bit, a slight amount, like I said, light amount, and then I just go back over it and buff it out, dry it off, and just see how it looks. Now, a lot of these older ones, I had an XL2 that had a fretboard that, I mean, it was jet black. It was amazing. It didn't show any of those layers. Now, I don't know why particularly that was, but that one was really amazing. I had another bass that was much more prominent and obvious looking than this one even. I mean, it looked, even from a few feet away, if you looked at it, even to the trained eye, you'd be like, oh, wow, that's a rosewood fretboard. So they vary, just like everything else does. I mean, there was a time, back in the day, I got my first Steinberger. I ordered it in 1984 because I was working at a music store that started carrying them as a brand. And I also was able, through the music store that I worked at, to get an in-house loan, which is the only way that I could afford doing that at that age, because it was, they weren't cheap. I mean, they were $1,800 or so back then, and of course I wanted it in a color instead of like the Model T version, any color you want as long as it's black. They actually could have made them in almost any color, really, technically, but it meant, they had to do them in production runs, obviously, and not everyone wants a cosmic blue or a candy apple red or whatever, although that would look phenomenal. But so they did have a sort of standard quote option, which was white. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get a white one. So I ordered an XL2 AW, which was an active tone circuit and white gel coat, because it's a gel coat finish over the top of the actual body itself, right? So it's like a fiberglass boat. The gel coat goes in first. It's like built in reverse. The finish goes on first in the form first, and then the thing is built inside of the finish. Kind of interesting, but anyway, regardless, I ordered it in '84, and they didn't do a run of them for a while, so I didn't get the bass until '85. But I love that thing. The thing is that I took it everywhere with me. Anyone that knew me back in the mid '80s would remember me for my lion's mane of hair, even though I wasn't a hippie and really didn't even listen to the Grateful Dead. But I had this mass amount of hair. I wasn't a hair metal guy either. But I also had a white Steinberger with me at all times. And that meant taking it like down by the beach. I had a headphone amp. I had the original bass Rockman, which was the Tom Schultz headphone amp. And I just played it all over the place. But it meant I was taking it. I mean, I was talking about subjecting an instrument to extreme conditions. I mean, I had gigs, outdoor gigs on a ferry, playing on the deck of a ferry in the salt fog. Oh, it's horrible. Anyway, so I got rid of that bass after, it was around 90 or 91. I kind of was going through a hard time musically and financially and relationship and everything, and I got rid of it, and it was stupid, but I can only imagine, because I didn't know anything about treating the fretboard with WD-40. I thought it was, all I needed to do is just wipe it down with, a rag or something to dry it off. And that's probably a good thing, honestly, that I did it that way and didn't treat it with anything else. But who's to say what that fretboard would look like? But this one, that's a very long, rambling tale indeed, sir. But this one looks like it's pretty good. I mean, when you look at that, you can still see, if I can stop shaking, you can still see some of what looks like lines in there of a grain. But again, it's not a wood grain, it's just the layers between the dark phenolic resin and the brown is the lighter color. Brown is the like the craft paper that was used in the laminate. Interesting, huh? So anyway, I'm just gonna keep kind of rubbing that in a little bit while I finish this up. Yeah, because right now this thing is just, I've got it all stripped down completely. I've got all of the metal parts off. Actually, some of them were a little bit rusty. How much I got a little bit left. Some of them are a little rusty, so I have them in some penetrating oil part soak, which also smells great. The combination of odor in here is just delicious. Yeah, while that's, soaking for, I'll probably let that soak for a little while. This I'm going to end up buffing out. But I've got everything off of it. I'm gonna clean this up. Like I said, I already dressed the frets. I'm going to just polish them once this is done. And it looks like the world's most expensive canoe paddle right now, carbon fiber canoe paddle. Hey, look, there's a canoe right there over my head. Well, how fitting. I'll get this put back together again. I think what I'm going to do, because with the L2s it was nice, they had the headpiece actually was you were able to use regular strings by clamping them down with grub screws, or you could use the double ball end strings, obviously. I've got a set of Ernie Ball Cobalt flats that I'm probably not going to use on anything else because I hate the purplistic pink silk that the top's round with. But of course, with this, you put them through there, you wind the grub screws down, you snip them off, and you don't see any of the winding for the silks. But because I thought, yeah, it'd be kind of fun to have a L2 and run it for a while with flats on it, Then I'll have an L2 with flats and an L2 with rounds. Guess I should probably get that L2 that's a unlined fretless too. And well, what else do I need? No, only kidding. I would love an L2 unlined fretless though, which would be an L2UF. I did end up getting another white XL2W. Wasn't an active, so it wasn't an XL2AW, but it was an XL2W. That was a really cool bass, but I don't know. I kind of got over the white thing. I always was chasing. I'd love to have the one back that I had originally, but I think it's lost to antiquity or the internet or the world. Maybe I'll find it someday. But I kind of like. I've come back around to just appreciating the black. None more black, as Nigel used to say, was wont to say, and it's just a really classic look. Now this took this pretty well. I'm pretty happy about this. I won't be able to buff it out one-handed, so I'll just go back over this one more time and make sure that it's rubbed in really well, and then I'll be buffing it off and drying it before I polish the frets. But yeah, I love these things. I mean, they're not for everybody. This one, it's interesting, talking about the fretboard, because back in the day, of course, they were considered to be indestructible. They could re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and not even go out of tune. And over time, we all have come to the realization that was obviously not the case. I mean, they were great instruments and incredibly stable. The tuning's the greatest stability of all time. But things like this, I mean, they need to have this kind of treatment done to drive the water out with the WD-40, right? Over time, and the frets need to be, adjusted and polished, dressed, whatever. If you're using round wounds, especially the zero fret. I mean, I got a pretty good amount of the wear out of that with the files, but it, that's something that wears a lot. The finish, because it's a gel coat finish, I mean, it can chip, it can craze, just like any boat. I've had plenty of fiberglass boats over the years and restored a bunch of them up there in the great state of Maine. And even just discoloration, you can delaminate, you can get some kind of material inside underneath the finish of the gel coat that over time reacts with something else, and boom, suddenly you've got blisters. Not osmotic blisters like you get in a boat, but even in something like this, you could have finished chips and so forth start appearing, even if you're really careful. So, they really are amazing instruments. I'm looking at this thing's over 40 years old now, and it sounds great, it plays great. But yeah, the idea that they didn't need anything and they were completely impervious to everything, including cosmic rays and whatever. or even that they were all exactly the same. Now, so interesting. I've got this one is an 83. I had another 83 recently that I sold, and I've got an 82 that is probably the keeper of all keepers. But my 82 is, it's got the same Steinberger sound brass back pickups that this one has. This bass weighs a pound more than mine. Go figure. So even though they were supposedly coming off the line and everything was, exactly the same, a 1 pound difference is a pretty big difference. And the other 83 I had was even heavier than that. So interesting. Is it interesting? I don't know. I think it's interesting. There you can see the brass inserts there for the bridge. That writing right there is probably from Jeff Babbage, as a matter of fact. Somebody etched their initials, probably the original owner or something. I don't know, I guess. Could be a production person. So I thought I got this from the original owner, but maybe not. There's a production number that's in there. It's like a piece of one of those punch tapes. This has been repaired. That's the bayonet plug-in. Actually, it has the bayonet leg rest, which is pretty cool. This underneath here too, by the way, everyone's like, oh, there's no wood in it. Well, there actually, I believe, is wood in there. There's a core, just like a lot of other things. If you're laying up a fiberglass boat, there's typically a core of something. And I know that because I had to excavate